Hello. So I'm going to tell you a story about retros first of all. I was at ThoughtWorks about 5 years ago, I reckon, and we were working in a client somewhere near here actually, can't remember exactly, it was Holborn somewhere, and we had a couple of non-ThoughtWorks British devs on this project, and they were a bit cynical. So the ThoughtWorks project guy who was running this thing, he thought the best way to deal with this is get it out and open in the retros. So they're a bit cynical, so what should I do? I should make sure that we run this absolutely properly, right? So I'm going to read the prime directive out at the beginning of every retro, because that'll sort it out. That'll sort out their cynicism. Regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. Now, the project manager was Canadian, so he just didn't understand why these two guys would just roll their eyes every time he said that. And it was there that I learned to do another opening for retros. What I do now when I run a retro is I say, in this place, we're just going to be honest. And when I say things are shit, I don't mean people are shit. I'm not having a go at you. Because it's translating for what actually people want to hear, right? They don't want to hear regardless of what we discover, because they've already stopped listening. After the word regardless, in fact, most people have stopped listening. But as soon as they hear the word shit, their ears prick up. So I should give the standard warnings about a Nic Ferrier talk. I swear quite a lot. Sorry about that. I don't mean to be offensive. I actually got told off at work recently because they found one of my videos where I was saying, the place where I work is really shit. And they said, you just can't say this sort of thing. And I said, well, but I did. So I come before you humbled. What am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? I could just fill the space with amusing anecdotes. Or we could sing Christmas hymns. Which should we do? Should we fill the space with amusing anecdotes? That's left hand. Or Christmas hymns, right hand. Come on, hands up, left or right, and we'll see which wins. I think that's mostly lefts. Okay, amusing anecdotes. So I guess I'm just going to tell you about what I always do the same thing. I just tell you a story about what I'm doing at the moment because I can't think of anything else to do and because I'm lazy, basically. So what am I doing? I'm working at this big financial institution, hundreds of thousands of people is the scale that we're working in. And it's kind of strange and it tells you very interesting things, I think, that we could all learn from. Now, also, I'm a hacker. So I totally agree with Enrique, is it? Yeah, GNU, absolutely. All of those things where you have to buy stuff and you have to pay for software, that's all nonsense, isn't it? I want to be able to see it, I want to be able to change it, I want to be able to do stuff with it. And more, it feels like who's read that book, Hackers by Stephen Levy? Hands up, who's read Hackers by Stephen Levy? Those of you who haven't, treat yourself to a Christmas present, right? If you're in IT, Hackers by Stephen Levy is a really, really inspiring book, I think, because it's about how we, as hackers, do things. It's about the history of hacking, where it comes from the MIT Model Railway Club and all of that kind of stuff, and working out how computers worked and the joy of doing that and what it can do for people and enable people to do amazing things and all of that. It's a very good book. And it feels like more and more, the more we progress, the older I get and the more time goes on, that there have been times when I thought, oh God, I'm so out of step that I'm completely wrong. The right way to do all of this is to buy big vendor things and have proper support and legal agreements and all of those things. And me, I just sit there going, why can't we just write some code? And I'm so wrong. But the more time goes on, the more we find out that that's the right way to do it, actually, it turns out. Because then you worry about security and you worry about data leakage and you worry about all those things. When you go to a big firm, they are supposed to worry about it, but do they? We don't know. In fact, we see lots of evidence that they don't. So actually, it's really good to go and write those little things. And often, when you go to a vendor, you get a big thing that can do all sorts of things, but you don't want all those things. You only want a few of them. So why don't you just write the thing that's just a few of them? So I'm a hacker and I'm working in this big organization which mostly operates in the way that it always has in terms of IT. But what's fascinating is that people are coming in, leaders are coming in and going, well, it has to change because we can see the world changing. And one, the way we do things is very, very expensive. And two, we're not only is the way we do things very expensive, but we've got to get even cheaper than that because our markets are being eroded by new competitors all the time who are being driven by this new technology. Manto Bank in London has started up, and it's fantastic, isn't it? What a great service. So it's kind of interesting being a hacker in this kind of organisation. Now, I have been very depressed on occasions working in a big organisation. I've been there for 3 years, and some depressing things happen, like they tell me off for swearing about them, but that's maybe understandable. But it's a message of hope, really. So 3 years ago, we started working with this team, about 100 people, and they were in a terrible mess. They were trying to get something done, and it wasn't working. Terrible relationship with their business. And 3 years later, this year, they've done 10,000 releases to production. And their incidents are like infinitesimally small, very small number of incidents. And the relationship with their business is fantastic. Really, really tight relationship with the business. They're getting stuff done. So here we are, this really big organisation that is struggling to change, trying to change, but struggling to change, and bits of it are absolutely changing. Now, I guess I want to talk about how we did some of that. Firstly, we did it by lying. Lying's a powerful tool. So it's quite funny. When we started, all of these things like Docker and containerization and all of those things, I had in my head, and I started about almost exactly 3 years ago, and I came into this place and I was thinking, well, obviously we'll need to go faster, and we'll need to containerize and different languages, and Java's probably all Java, and they probably need to do different things, and da 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 da. But I didn't make the mistake of telling them any of this. Because that is a mistake. When you talk about your plans, and actually there's really good research about this, that the more you talk about your plans, the less you are likely to do them. Because the more you're talking about it, the less you're actually doing it. So one good trick is to never talk about what your plans are. And although this was very frustrating for the people who work with me, because they would constantly say things like, but what are we going to do in 6 months' time? And I would go, oh, I don't know. And they would say, but you clearly do know, you clearly do. No, I don't know. Why don't we do the smallest thing possible today to make it better? And apparently they used to have meetings where they'd all get together and try and work out what we were trying to do. Because we wouldn't tell them what we were trying to do. If we could have found those meetings, we'd have stopped them, because the more people are trying to work out what you're trying to do, the less they are actually trying to fix it every day. The other interesting, really fascinating discovery is that talking to people is good. This was a complete surprise to me, of course. So here's some scenarios, right? You've got a central IT team who run all of the infrastructure and all of that sort of stuff, and they almost never talk to you, and you have loads of incidents because you're trying to do things that bump up against the way they work, and you just get frustrated with them and angry with them, and so you get them on the phone and you give them a really good shouting to, and of course they get worse. And so then more incidents happen, so you get them on the phone and you really shout at them, and then you go out and you have a meeting about them and complain about them and say, oh God, they're awful. And it goes on and on and on until you realise that they're your colleagues, and maybe you should stop being an arse and actually just go and talk to them about what you're trying to do. And now you've made it so much worse than it was. You're going to have to talk to them a lot about what you're trying to do, and maybe even say sorry for being an arse. I have to say sorry for being an arse in every single meeting. It's quite funny. I normally just start off with it. I'm really sorry, I'm going to be an arse at some point in this meeting. I apologise for that in advance. That sometimes works. People can then point it out when you have been an arse. Is this the bit where you're being an arse? Oh yes, yes it is. Yes. So, particularly where you have those massive silos, it's really important to try and get people to talk together. So here's a story of hope about this. I've been trying to build a proper internal cloud because we have all sorts of rules, sensible rules that are there for a reason about getting infrastructure live. You can't put infrastructure live unless the thing that you're running on it is resilient. Well, that's a good idea, because you don't want to put this live and then have it go down and the customers go, that's a good rule. It ought to be in the bank's CMDB. That's a good rule. It ought to pass some sort of security testing. Ooh, yeah, that's quite a good rule. So we've got all these rules, but they're all done by paperwork. So automating those is obvious. It's an obvious thing. But, everybody knows it's obvious. When I stood in front of all of the people and said, look, why don't we automate these things? They all went, yeah. Well, what do you think we've been trying to do for 5 years? And I went, good, well done. Let's do it then. So these poor people, they're sat there doing their jobs every day, defending the bank against all sorts of cyber attacks and God knows what, and just trying to get things done in a massive bureaucracy. And then somebody comes along and starts yelling at them because they won't let them use Puppet. So instead of that, going and talking to people and saying why you want to do it. And one of the realizations is that there's tens of thousands of people. And every single one of them probably needs talking to in some respect. And people are busy, so nobody else does the talking for you, so you have to do it. So, and what is this? This is just that bit that we call cultural change. Every now and again we do this thing, like where we go, oh yes, well DevOps, it's not really about tools, is it? It's about cultural change. But nobody ever knows what that exactly means. What is cultural change? Is it bringing Jenkins in? No. It's talking to people. It's going and talking to them and making sure that they understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it, and listening to them and their concerns. And sometimes their concerns are bonkers, completely mad, but they've got them for a reason. So you just have to keep asking, but why are you mad? And normally they will tell you in the end why they're mad, so keep going. So we have built this thing this year where we've been trying to do all sorts of different forms of cloud, and it's very cool being able to do different forms of cloud in a big bureaucratic institution. But internally, we've built this thing, almost it works. It's palpable sense that it almost works. And we've done it by talking to people. The amount of code we've written to deliver this is probably, 500 lines of code to deliver something that works, that actually will allow teams to build production infrastructure in a couple of hours without having to do 1,000 spreadsheets and loads of paperwork. In fact, no paperwork at all. And that has just been achieved just by talking to people. So, lie to people, keep talking to them, those are two things. Measuring things, that's another one. Measure everything, but pick measurements, choose your weapons. So in where I am, we have chosen to emphasize releases and incidents, and we paint them on the walls. We put the number of releases that everybody's doing and the number of incidents they're having that everybody's suffering under. And you can immediately see where the problems are because of that. And it's a really crap metric, releases and incidents, but at a very high granularity, it does tell you everything that you need to know. obviously underneath that there are loads of other things. Another thing about metrics, though, is to not get dragged into a whole load of discussions about whether they're valuable or not. I think you kind of have to be quite hard about metrics. We have a big internal debate still about value. And it was interesting that you picked up on that. Because although I disagree with a lot of the things that you were talking about, I think it should be obvious to people that if the platform's down, it's not valuable. So keeping the platform up is business value. The business should be worried about that. And indeed, our best business people already realise that. And they say, production is the most important thing. I want these other 5,000 things done as well, but you must keep production up. That's the number one priority. And getting people to repeat that message. One key learning about DevOps culture is that communication is just so hard to do. Now, Peter Mandelson used to say about changing the Labour Party. I don't particularly like Peter Mandelson, I have to say, but this is a brilliant quote, I think. He used to say, it was only when we were so fucking bored of talking about the change in the Labour Party that we'd almost given up that people actually started to go, oh, are you changing the Labour Party? And that's what it feels like all the time, right? So you go on and on and on and on and on and on about whatever it is, cloud, and you're so bored of talking about cloud. So I'm coming to walk today and I'm going to talk about cloud again. And you're so bored you've almost given up when people go, oh, what's this cloud thing? And you think, oh my God. But you've just got to keep going. You've just got to keep talking about it because change is hard. What was I talking about? Can't remember. Anyway, so lying to people, talking to people, measuring things. Ah, yes, measuring things. Being firm about measuring things. So there is no such thing as measurable value. We've got to get over this. Has anybody been able to measure value where they work? Anybody? Hands up. Anybody? I'm waiting for anybody, anywhere, to put their hand up. You measure your value?
Yeah, every day I'm in the office.
Good measurement. Number of hours that you work or sat down at work in your chair is obviously the best measure of value. I'm sorry? Amount billed. So that's what value is, right? Value for most organisations, whether you're a charity and don't have any income, you just have spend. Obviously you have income donations, right? But it's not the same. You're not making money. Or whether you're a commercial organisation trying to make money, value is money. That's what money is. Money is an abstraction, so we can talk about value. So when you take a bit of the organisation and say, but is what you're doing valuable? I don't know. We can't do it. You'd have to look at the whole thing, right? And then, of course, it can break because what we do might be valuable, but they might do something invaluable with it or unvaluable, right? But the point is, if you can give people the capability to do things, if you can go fast and change things rapidly, then they've got a chance of doing something valuable, the business people, whoever they are. But then, what on earth is that about? Why are the business people and IT people? What is that? Does that make sense to anybody? Why are the people who can't do IT now? It's 2018, for God's sake. Do you know, there's a guy I know who is a product owner that I work with. He's super cool, right? And everybody laughs at him because he prints out all his emails. And then when you ask him something, he just goes, whoosh, yeah, look, there it is. He doesn't go tap, 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 tap. Oh, I can't find it. Oh, Outlook's gone down. Oh, God. He goes, whoosh, and finds it in his big pile of paper. It's so awesome. So maybe there are still some Luddites, but it feels to me like he's not a Luddite. He's just doing exactly the right thing. But yeah, why is that? Why are there separate business people and IT people? And we're at the edge, I think, where I am in bits of it. We're at the edge of trying to break that down and go, this doesn't work. You know, if you want to find out whether your customers think that this rate is good, or whether we book that well for you, you're going to have to combine the disciplines of IT and whatever your business is. And obviously in a big organisation like I work in, we do a lot of different things. But you're going to somehow, you need to have that capability across the board. You need to have people who can do everything, which was the idea of the DevOps people, right? The idea of DevOps was this person who can do both things or a combination of both teams. But DevOps was always a really fucking stupid combination of words, because it's not DevOps, it's DevOps, test, biz, I don't know, whatever, UX, all the other things, right? It's about the rounded whole. And if we have that separation with business people, that's just mad. So, lying to people, talking to people, measuring things, and not having silos. Is there anything else? What else have I learned in the last few years? Oh, yeah, I've learned that if you don't exercise, you get fat. I've learned that. Because I have worked like a bastard for 3 years and I've got really fat. So that seems to be something that one has proved. What else? Languages don't seem to matter. I am struggling to leave this behind because I think it would be really good. I guess I can't speak any foreign languages. I'm rubbish at it, and I've always been rubbish at it. But I'd really like to be one of those persons who can stand at parties and go, oh, but I'm quanto quente. I just like that because I'm a bit of a twat. So I think I kind of displaced that into computer languages, and I'm a bit of a computer language geek. The answer to Ruby, by the way, is Crystal Lang. So fucking awesome, because it's like Ruby but compiled. It's amazing. Except don't watch the videos about it because it's a really, really stupid one. Anyway, the point is, the trouble is that languages don't seem to matter, because this team that I've been working with, mostly they've been just using Java and JavaScript, which are really boring, but mostly it doesn't matter, that it's just worked. And one of the things that was interesting, very early on, we introduced Clojure, and there was a bunch of just like 5 or 6 people in this team who got excited about that. Who didn't code already, really. They were opsy sort of people, and they got into dev because it was radically different, because it wasn't Java, because they'd had horrible experiences with Java. They'd been bitten on the leg or something like that. You know how it is. So Clojure made a difference to them, but that doesn't seem to have mattered for the rest of the time. And indeed, people who haven't coded at all, who haven't had a nasty experience with Java, we have then taught Java to, and they've written Java, and it's, you know, they're now happily coding away. Okay, they're not writing trading systems or anything like that, but they're happily coding in it. So language doesn't seem to matter much, which is a personal disappointment, because I would like a massively heterogeneous, cool way of doing it. Perhaps, how am I doing for time? 5. We'll have questions. So one last thing. I think, and it's coming back to this lying to people. So our last breakthrough with this team, I guess, was a complicated one. And it's about, so let me tell you this story. In a big financial institution or any enterprise, you've probably got lots of rules about getting the continuous delivery is hard. Because you can't just put it on live and offer commit. You've got to know that it works, otherwise you are going to get into trouble. And it's not necessarily serious trouble, but political trouble, because you want to work in this way, and there are people who fear it for whatever reason, good reasons probably, and you haven't had time to convince them. So if you make a bunch of stupid fucking mistakes, they're just going to jump on you, right? So you can't really, even if your business is going, yeah, we don't care if you cause incidents, you can't really do that without suffering the repercussions. So one of the key things that you realize is that you've got to write tests that are going to run on production. And the obvious thing for everybody to do is go, oh yeah, well, we need to fully test it, don't we? we need to fully test it. When it goes to production, we need to fully test it. We need to run the regression test. And it will take an hour or a couple of halves an hour. It'll take however long it takes, right? But it has to be a full regression test. Really, the problem is not how long it's going to take when it runs on production. Really, the problem is how long is it going to take you to write those things? Because that stops you doing continuous delivery. You now can't do continuous delivery because now you've got to build this entire regression suite. What we realized was that you didn't have to do that. All you have to do is do the testing before that in dev and UAT and those sorts of places and make sure it works. And then make sure that that artifact was going to production. So all you need to do is write a test that proves that that's the right artifact. Of course. So that's an interesting observation, right? So all you have to do is prove that the artifact is right. So immediately, people who are developers and people like us go, right, so I just test the version number then. No, because we could have a bunch of problems about we've delivered the version number somehow, but not the code in the artifact. Somewhere something went wrong in the build. And anyway, there's this risk thing. Maybe you need to think about what you're doing and what the damage you could cause to production would be, and therefore choose a risk-based approach. Getting people to understand that, I don't know how many of you understand it, but getting people to understand that this is not a mechanical thing. This is a risk-based thing. Think about what you're doing and do the appropriate testing for it. Oh, right, so test the version number then. No, not test the version number. Think about what you're doing and do the appropriate testing for it. That is something that you can't write down what to do. People have to think. And therein lies the rub. Okay, I've whittled on now, and we didn't get to sing any hymns. I like singing hymns, but that's for another day.